I was a socialist when I was 14.
Oh, yeah.
Gang, what's up? Aaron right here, Candian Looney. So we have Dr. Jordan Peterson. Again, we're waiting for Parliament to resume so we can cover the House of Commons. That's what we do here. Like, that's what we prefer to do. But in the meantime, might be interesting to take a look back at Jordan Peterson when he made an appearance at Oxford University and had to fight back so many of these spoiled brat kids and their woke minds. Like, listen to Dr. Jordan Peterson. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you won't. Like, anyhow, this one goes off the rails pretty much off the get-go. Dr. Jordan Peterson, man, almost had to take a year off after this one. Let's take a gander at how crazy these woke religious folks are. They're so self-righteous. Like, it's audacity. Let's take a peek at audacity.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
Hello.
Hello. I just wondered whether you thought pursuing a political life, whether directly or more obliquely in your case, is still a noble endeavour, or whether the political domain has become so infested, such a talking shop, that you just can't get anything done, and the most worthwhile thing may be just to stay away from it and focus on other things.
Well, I don't think in many ways that it's worse than it, all things considered, it's no worse than it usually is. And the problem with not involving yourself in the political is that it's dirty work and it has to be done. And if you don't do it, so here's a rule: all the civic responsibility you refuse to shoulder will be taken up by tyrants and used against you. And you might say, well, I'm too moral to involve myself in the political, and you don't have to be all that moral to claim that you're too moral to be involved in the political, but what's the alternative? You're going to leave it to the corrupt few? That's not very wise. So you're morally obliged to shoulder at least your weight in terms of political obligation. And if you can manage, then more. Can you do it honorably? That's not really a question that's much different than can you conduct yourself in any complex enterprise ethically. It's difficult, and there's additional temptations that come along with political power. Those are the temptations of power, generally speaking, and that's a blandishment that is notoriously difficult to resist, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible. But as I said, the core of the issue is, well, if good men don't hoist their political load, then the pathological will take their place. And that's not a good idea. It's a perennial problem, too. I mean, one of the things I've observed about the political realm, I have friends in Canada, for example, one man in particular who I know who would make a wonderful prime minister, is extremely competent and deeply ethical and charming and witty and careful, but he already runs a remarkable set of enterprises, and he'd have to abandon all of that, as many of the people who have taken political office in the US have had to in the last month. He'd have to abandon all that and arguably take a position that's of less consequence than the one that he already occupies. But there's a genuine problem if the most competent refuse political office, because who does that leave us with? Well, we see who it leaves us with, generally speaking. So, and besides that, when you're your age, for example, you don't have any right to be cynical about the political. It's like, what the hell do you know, fundamentally? Well, seriously, it's like, well, I'm cynical about politics. It's like, well, you're 25. What gives you the right to be cynical? Are you a captain of industry? Do you have 5 children and 10 grandchildren? Have you had a successful marriage? You know, have you proved yourself even in the academic realm? No. What? Well, right. Good. So I'll close with an observation in that regard. You know, I mean, people move from, if they mature, people move from naivety to cynicism, right? And cynicism is actually an improvement over naivety, because it means that you've opened your eyes to the malevolence, let's say, of the world. The mistake is stopping there, because, well, you could become cynical about your own doubt. I suppose that's the end of that voyage. And you become cynical about your own doubt, and you think, oh, I see, I have a moral obligation to be optimistic. I have a moral obligation to promote a positive view of the future. I have a moral obligation to take on my civic responsibility, despite my cynicism, let's say. And that cynicism might be like your open-eyed appreciation for the corruption of the world. But that's no excuse for not contending with it. And so, contend with it, and learn, and see if you're capable of withstanding the temptations of power if it's ever offered to you. And so, that's your responsibility. And you can walk into that with your eyes open, and that'll increase the probability that you'll do it properly.
Okay, we'll take the next question.
Hello.
Hello.
Check the mic, please. The mic's in the...
Right there.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Dr. Peterson. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm currently reading your latest book, and you talk about toxic compassion. So my question is, how do we manage to pray in a way that empowers people instead of disempowering them?
Sorry, how do I manage to?
Still care about people, but in a way that doesn't disempower them or become toxic. And how you mentioned toxic compassion.
I still can't hear you well because there's feedback in the mic. Just tell me, and I think everyone else heard that.
Yes. How do you manage to be compassionate without it being toxic compassion when you talked about Eve?
Oh, there we go. How do you manage to become compassionate without the compassion being toxic? That's a really good question. Yeah. First of all, it's a good question because of the admission that compassion can become toxic, right? Well, you can think about this biologically. Let's start with that. So, human beings have the largest dependency period of any animal. And so you could imagine that that could go very badly wrong, right? Because anything difficult can go very badly wrong. And so you could imagine that it takes wisdom to apply maternal compassion with discernment. Okay, now, so here's a conundrum that women are faced with, for example. So because our infants are born at in such an undeveloped state, they're basically helpless for the first 9 months, let's say before they can start to crawl. And even then they're pretty helpless, but they're really helpless when they can't even crawl. And so the only attitude that you are allowed to have towards an infant is compassion. The infant is 100% right in its distress all the time, right? And you're at its beck and call, and rightly so. But then as the infant moves towards autonomy, you have to pull back from that compassion. You have to allow space for autonomy, and you have to encourage that separation. Now that's hard. It's hard because you've made a bond with the baby, and maybe you found your identity in that bond. You might well have, and so you're actually upset that you have to sacrifice the intensity of that relationship to allow for the autonomy of the child. That might be particularly true if your own identity is somewhat lacking, and so that maternal instinct can start to become parasitical, for example. And so that's a difficult thing to contend with psychologically, and genuinely difficult. The way that we mediate that institutionally is with marriage, fundamentally, because men are temperamentally less agreeable than women, and the classic situation around children in a family, and this can vary by sex, but this is the stereotypical perspective, is that the woman will protect and the man will encourage. And then you might ask, well, how much should you encourage a child compared to how much you would protect them? And the answer is, it depends on the child. And so this is actually something that has to be fought out between parents, and even for women who are more disagreeable, the propensity for them to protect is strong, not least because they did function as the primary protectors, let's say for the first 9 months. That's a difficult thing to modify. And then of course it is a matter of contention. If a child is misbehaving, for example, under what circumstances do you discipline and under what circumstances do you console? Well, you face the same conundrum within the confines of an intimate relationship, right? Because if you have a relationship with someone that you love, an adult, your wife or your husband, some of the time you're going to console and some of the time you're going to discipline, and the relationship is actually, at least in part, that negotiation. You have to have that around children. So I would say one of the answers to that is don't do it alone. Right, it's a very difficult thing to get right. And you need someone who's acting as an opponent, like a benevolent opponent, to help you chart your course properly. And maybe you need more than one person. It doesn't hurt to have a grandparent around who can also offer a certain amount of the advice that might rectify your approach. I would also say too, it's certainly the case that the maternal presence for children is very important, particularly in the first year, but really cardinally for the first 3 years. And so then you might say, well, how much of an individual identity should a given mother have in those first 3 years? And the answer to that should be something like enough individual identity so that the mother has better things to do than to infantilize her child. Right, and so you can see in that you could have your cake and eat it too, right? You could offer your child the maternal protection that's necessary, but given that you have your own individual pursuits that are important to attend to, you'll have something valuable to do when your child could be spending his time or her time alone and functioning in an autonomous manner. And so that's a good balance too. And that also stops you from losing your identity, so to speak, in the midst of the maternal endeavor. And I think that's a good balance for women to strike, The other thing too, as a woman, is you want to model competent adulthood for your child. You want to start doing that very early, and so you should have an autonomous existence. And that's also, knowing that and focusing on that is also going to help you make the difficult discriminating judgments that are necessary to help you determine when you console and when you say, stand on your own 2 feet. So.
We'll take the next question. Remember there, second from the left. Yes.
Hello.
Hello. In your last interview with Stephen Barrett, you said one very important phrase, which is that...
With Stephen...
Bartlett.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
okay.
When you said that bad things happen when good men hold their tongue, it really struck me. And I think when I've had in an institution such as Oxford, where I had the optimism that I would come and be able to be very open about my views and thoughts. And I had realized that that is not entirely the case. And the point that I'm getting to is that I am very open, very outspoken about my stance protecting anti-wokeism, as it says. And when I mention your name, for example,
Don't do that.
there are people who take me aside into the corner and says, Adriana, you cannot say that. You cannot bring
It's
that
like
person
saying
up.
Voldemort.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And but I have so many people, so many fellow students here who then confide in me and said, I am not as brave as you to share these views online. I cannot speak freely, and I don't feel like I can be canceled. My career can suffer. I also fear that every single day, but your phrase really inspired me. And so my question is that how do individuals who depend on building a career in an economy that is driven by wokeism can survive and still stay true to their moral stance?
So here's a definition of faith. Okay. Faith is the willingness to assume that no matter what happens to you, if you tell the truth, it's the best thing that could possibly happen to you. Now, this is a very weird thing to understand. Now, the reason people lie or remain silent, there's two reasons. One is to gain an undeserved advantage, and the other is to escape a deserved punishment. And so people will lie and manipulate or remain silent to, you could say, to twist the fabric of reality so that it makes itself manifest to their benefit. But the question is, benefit by what standards and over what time frame? And so it's definitely the case that you can gain a temporary advantage by deception, but that doesn't mean that you're gaining a medium to long-term advantage. Right, and so then you might say, well, how do I play things out so that I balance short-term, medium-term, and long-term advantage optimally? And the answer to that is you say what you think. Right, and then there's all sorts of things that might happen, including the things that you just described, and it's also potentially the case that you might pay a price for in your career, but you got to ask yourself, do you want to walk down a career road to a destination that requires you to hold your tongue? Like, if you're not popular because of what you say with people who might hire you, you might thank your lucky stars that they don't want you around because you don't want to be anywhere near them. And if you do say what you have to say and someone comes along and says, you're just exactly the sort of person we're looking for, then you get to go and work with those people. And that means that you have a life that's actually yours instead of the life of whatever lie you happen to be telling for the sake of convenience. And so, and I would say too, you should be afraid of saying what you think, but you should be a lot more afraid of hiding. Right, you start hiding. I saw this with professors, and it's still happening now. It's like, so the undergraduate says, well, I have to write what the professor wants or I won't get the grade. And then, which is, by the way, far less true than you might fear, even among relatively woke and ideologically corrupt professors. And then you're a graduate student and you think, well, I can't really say what I think because I haven't got a faculty position yet. And then you're a junior faculty member and you think, God, I'm not tenured. But when I'm tenured, I'll say what I think, and then you get tenured and you think, well, I'm not full professor yet. And then you're a full professor and you're a 35-year-old coward who hasn't said a true word in 20 years. And now you think all of a sudden, because you're secure, you're going to be brave. That's your theory of courage, is it? The more secure you get, the braver you'll be. Well, that's as stupid a theory of courage as you could possibly hope to develop. So start now and grow a hide, like a thick hide, and see what happens. Like my experience, And it's not only my experience, but my experience with the people I know is that I know lots of people who paid a price for abiding by their conscience, and a lot of them are riding pretty high at the moment, right? Things swung around in a remarkable way, and that tends to happen. Now, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you tell the truth and they shoot you, and that's the end of that. But I mean, Jay Bhattacharya, I know Jay, and Jay is an epidemiologist at Stanford, and a good one, and he wrote the Great Barrington Declaration and got pilloried by his compatriots for doing so, but Stanford has a pretty solid tenure arrangement, and also Stanford has the Hoover Institute, so people who are more conservative have a bit of protection, but Bhattacharya was dragged through the mud in a pretty major way, and now he runs the National Institute of Health. Right, and he's not the only one that such things have happened to, and so I would say, you know, the truth is a long-term and profound game, and you got to decide if you're going to play it, and there'll be costs just like there are to everything. But if you're going to align yourself with anything in your life, you might as well align yourself with the truth, because then at least you have reality on your side, and that's a good deal as you're progressing forward. So take your lumps now and learn how to do it, and you'll be fortified optimally when you make your way out into the world. When I applied to graduate school, I wrote a very strange letter. And I did that on purpose. I told my potential advisor as clearly as I could exactly what I was like, for better or for worse. And there's no doubt that many people read that letter and thought there isn't a hope in hell that I'd give that guy an interview, but the person I did end up working with read the letter and thought, that's just the person I'm looking for. And I had a great relationship with him. I still work with him. It's 45 years later. If you lie, then the life you have isn't yours. The life you have is the life of the spirit of the lie. And if that's the life you want, then go ahead and lie with silence or with commission. But if you want your life, then tell the truth. Your truth is you. And the life you have, if you tell the truth, is your life. Well, what possible threat would be sufficient to entice you to give that up? Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Dr. Peterson. Thank you so much for speaking at the Oxford Union this evening. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. I'm a theology student at Wycliffe Hall here in Oxford. I was wondering what your stance is on cultural Christianity. And by that I mean the expectation to go to church, to abide by Christian morals, things like that, without necessarily having a personal conviction or pursuing a personal relationship with God. Whilst I see the benefits in cultural Christianity, in that it provides a framework for the structure of society, I wonder if it only goes so far. Do you think there should be more emphasis on developing one's personal relationship with God instead, or as well as cultural Christianity?
Well, I would say that...
Sorry, I just want, if we can do a short answer, because the time is very short, we can take one more question.
A short answer?
Thank you.
I don't know.
And I believe in you, you can do it.
When I was a kid, I used to, 13 years old, let's say, I liked to be cynical about those who attended church, you know, those people who were Christian 1 hour a week and then were ordinary sinners the rest of the time. And when I got substantially older, I realized that aiming upward toward the divine for 1 hour a week is a lot more than not doing it ever. Right, and then I would also say that to some degree everyone who's a Christian is a cultural Christian, because nobody can manifest the full depth of the faith in their own life, right? We all fall short of the glory of God, and so better a cultural Christian than nothing at all, you might say. And then also, doing a good thing badly is much better than not doing it at all. So, and maybe you start with practice and maybe you're not even committed to it, but you at least have the possibility that will grow. You can go to the gym once a month and for 15 minutes, and that's better than nothing. And maybe in 5 years it's 3 times a week and you're in pretty good shape. And so you don't want to be cynical about people's stumbling attempts to make their way uphill. And I would say that's even the case if you're culturally Christian merely to camouflage yourself properly in the cloak that your neighbors expect. At least then you're showing some sign of caring what other people think about what you do, which is part of the hallmark of being social. And so, you know, there's no end to the depth that you can discover if you pursue any genuine conviction to the utmost degree, but, you know, you have to start with stumbling steps forward, and you don't want to be too harshly judgmental about that.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Is that short enough?
Yes, that's great.
Oh, yeah.
Right on the spot. Yes, remember that?
Hello.
Hello. My question is in regards to a comment you made on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple years prior, where you called being transgender a sociological contagion and compared trans people to Satanists. To Satanists.
No, I don't think so.
You called being transgender equivalent to participating in satanic rituals in the 1980s. This is a quote.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last part.
You called being transgender and you compared that to satanic rituals that occurred in daycares in the 1980s.
I see. So
Yes.
that's very different than the proposition that you laid before me.
Right.
No,
You do have a history of
seriously different.
intense anti-trans comments, so I wanted to question you on that. In the United States, trans youth have the highest rates of suicide among any demographic. How do you respond to those who believe your comments have cultivated a climate of hostility against trans people and contributed to this alarming rise in suicide rates?
Okay, so first of all, I respond to them like I responded to you by pointing out the falsehood of their question. The question you asked me had absolutely nothing to do with what I said, as you well knew. And the moralizing
I just want to emphasize,
And the moralizing element of your accusation that constituted the last half of your question is also equally ill formulated. You have no idea what you're talking about. The idea that my comments had anything to do with the hypothetical rise in suicide rates among transgender people is preposterous. And there's also no evidence whatsoever that those suicide rates that you're describing are a consequence of any attitude whatsoever towards their hypothetically transgender
lack
status.
of social acceptance, which is definitely cultivated by comments like yours that deny the existence of trans people.
What makes you think you know what you're talking about? I cannot understand for a moment.
Lack of social acceptance is a driving force behind trans youth committing suicide. And I'm asking you to explain why you feel it's appropriate to deny the existence of transgender people.
I can't possibly imagine anybody sequencing a collection of questions more cliched, formulaic, and accusatory than the ones that you just managed. You don't have any idea about what you're talking about, and your confidence far exceeds your competence.
I'm friends with many transgender individuals.
I also don't know who educated you at this fine university, but they're doing a damn dismal job.
I would like to, Dr. Peterson, I think one of the things at Oxford Union we welcome all kind of questions, and I think I would appreciate if the substance of what she's asking.
There was no substance. You can't answer the substance of a question when you're asked a question with no substance. So,
denying the existence of an entire community and comparing transgender people to participating in a sociological contagion
They are participating in a sociological contagion, obviously. Why in the world do you think there's been an explosion in prevalence with regards to transgender identification among juvenile women? Why do you think that? Do you know that that's the pattern of social contagions for the last 350 years? Do you know it's always juvenile women? It was eating disorders, it was cutting, it was the eating disorders were anorexia and bulimia. In Freud's time, it was hysteria.
So I take a lot of issue with you pretending to care about women as an avenue for perpetuating hate towards minority groups. You did this earlier in your conversation with the president, and you're doing it once more. But
you really are something.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
Thank you, Arushi. We'll go to the next question. Anyone else? A lot of people. Would you like to choose someone this time?
Like an accusation of hate, particularly one that's formulated in that manner, that begins with the proposition that I was comparing transgender people to those who participated in satanic rituals, which is not at all what I said or meant on the Joe Rogan special, is not a question with substance, and that's for sure. It's not a question at all. It's a form of moralizing Pharisaism that's designed to reputation savage the target of the question in precisely the manner that female personalities characterized by antisocial bullying are particularly proficient at. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that question.
Your question.
Hello. So my question... My question is, where do you strike a balance between the individual versus the influencer or the head of state when it comes to freedom of speech? Is the freedom of speech of Javier Milei or Gustavo Petro the same as any other civilian?
I don't know exactly what you mean by the same. Do you mean of the same value? Do you mean of the same legal standing? I'm not sure what you mean by the same.
I guess in the same value. So can Gustavo Petro, head of state, tweet as a person, or is he tweeting as a head of state? Is there a balance between this? That's where my question is going.
Okay, so there's two questions there, I guess, and one of them is that has to do with the value of any individual's utterances. Okay, so I actually think that this is, you might think about this as a metaphysical statement. I don't think there's any difference in quality in relationship to the truth of any individual's speech. So it's just as important that you speak the truth as it is that any person chosen at random from anywhere speaks the truth. And I think that's part of the reflection, you might say, of our divine value. I'm part of the axiomatic presumption of free Western society is that every person, peculiar as that might be, reflects the image of God, and there's deep truth in that. It's no different really than speaking metaphysically about the ultimate value of each individual, and what that means is that the relationship that each of us has with the truth has a world-redeeming quality, and that's regardless of your position. And that's why, for example, in many of the Old Testament stories, there's tremendous emphasis on there's a scene, for example, in the story of what's the prophet who identified conscience as the voice of God. A widow is contrasted with Jezebel, who's a queen, and the widow conducts herself, despite her poverty, in a hospitable and truthful manner, and in so doing indicates her moral superiority in the genuine sense to the corrupt queen. And that story is a reflection of the fact that even when someone who is lowly pursues the truth in the course of their individual pursuits, that is part of the force that sets the world straight. And I think that's true. Now, having said that, I would also say that you're responsible to have the your impulsive proclivity with regard to what you might say, bounded by recognition of your social responsibility. And so if you're the CEO of a corporation or the leader of a country, you have to conduct yourself in a manner that's commensurate with that role, particularly if you adopted it voluntarily. And so it isn't as if Millet, for example, if his right to free speech is truncated, it's that as a responsible head of a complex organization, he should govern his tongue in accordance with his responsibility. Right.
To take one last question from the audience. Just the member there behind the phone. Yes.
Hello.
Good evening, Dr. Peterson. My question is about universities, and given that universities are coming under increasing scrutiny from the public for perceptions of wokeism, students don't trust their universities because they think they're cracking down on them. We've seen this with protests, encampments. They think the universities are holding them back in some way. What do you think the governing bodies of universities ought to do to navigate how students and the public perceive them, and what they can do to gain trust back from both those members of society?
Well, they shouldn't navigate in relationship to how the public perceives them. That's actually part of the problem. Just as you shouldn't navigate through the world in relationship to how you're perceived. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't care what other people think. You should care about your reputation, but you shouldn't be attempting to game the system to your reputational advantage, which is what people tend to do if they're strategizing or maneuvering for the sake of public relations. Like, what you should do is conduct yourself in accordance with the dictates of your conscience and let the cards fall wherever they will. And if universities do that, then they'll regain the trust of the public. They had the trust of the public for a long time. You know, when I worked in Boston in the 1990s, for example, or at McGill before that, for that matter, Harvard had a stellar reputation, and it was well deserved because by and large it was conducting itself as a truth-seeking enterprise. And I could see that at all levels of the university. Like, the undergraduates were committed, top quality students, they were forthright in their intellectual endeavors, they were upward striving, there was a culture of meritorious attainment. The junior professors were the hottest young minds that could be gathered from the multitude of universities across the world, because Harvard was a very attractive place to work. The senior faculty were genuinely educated and erudite and committed to their work, such that if we had faculty meetings, everybody tried to get them over with as fast as possible so they could go back to their labs. And the administration, by and large, served first the undergraduates and then the senior professors, and instead of themselves, let's say. And so that was working like a charm. And that wasn't that long ago. I mean, it's 30 years now, so it's getting to be some time, but there's no reason the universities, in principle, the universities could return to such conduct. It strikes me as rather unlikely. That might be, I think Oxford and Cambridge have a crack at it, possibly, because of the way your institutions are formulated with that collegiate independence, which gives them a fighting chance against a centralizing administration of woke mob, let's say. It's trickier in the United States and in Canada, and for the life of me, I can't see how the universities, in essence, can be salvaged, not least because first of all, they're hyper-dominated by the administration, which was itself subject to a coup by the progressive mob, and the professors, by and large, are tilted so strongly towards the left that, given their tenure, I can't see how that can be reversed or even ameliorated. Like, it shouldn't be reversed because you want a diverse range of political opinions at a university, but it should be at least balanced, and I can't see for the life of me how that's possible. What, are you going to fire half the faculty? No, definitely not. And even if you wanted to, where the hell would you find the new professors to replace them? So the university shouldn't be concentrating on their reputation per se, and manipulating public opinion to get back in their good graces. They should return to their truth-seeking mission and let the cards fall where they will. And it isn't obvious to me at all how that's going to happen.
I will interrupt here. I think this is the last question we will take from the audience. And before that, we close this ceremony. I just have one final question, which is, what is the biggest issue you have been wrong about? What do you think?
I was a socialist when I was 14.
As a European, I am a European, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, Irish citizen. Yeah, so there you
welcome.
go.
Welcome.
Speaking as a European.
WTF.
Here, here. How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein? More than just elbows.
And as the most European of the non-European countries,
being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you sought
what
to
possible
avoid.
conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. These are Muslim values. These are Canadian values.
Hi, everyone. Congratulations, you're spending more money on taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined.
Hey, that's something everyone can enjoy.
All right, gang, thank you all very much for watching. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe. Smash that subscribe. We're trying to grow this thing. Canadian Federal Politics. Get yours right here. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the next video.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Now I have a question. Who's ready? How many kids did you molest with Jeffrey Epstein? More than just elbows.
Wow.
I am a European, actually.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, Irish citizen. Yeah.
These are Muslim values.
A real change.
These are Canadian values.
Wow.
Speaking as a European,
I love. Happy birthday! A few days short. A little bit. A few days short, but didn't have a chance to see you on the day.
Reticent to
Because
talk
I'm
about
a good
that.
because I'm a good negotiator. I have negotiated a number of situations in the past. I know how to manage crises.
This is the most consequential vote of our lifetimes. A real change.
These are Canadian values.
Because President Trump has ignited a trade war that is ruptured. No, we don't like Trump here.
All right, elbows up.
Elbows up. Happy birthday!
Being aware of what potential conflicts of interest you
What
sought
possible
to avoid.
conflict would you have, Stephanie? Stephanie, I'm complying with the rules. I'm complying with the rules in advance. Point final. Look inside yourself, Rosemary.